Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast. This is episode 104, entitled UX, What on Earth Is It? And we'll be joined later by David Wormsley from davidwormsley.com and Paul Lacey to have a chat about that. It's a discussion episode and Paul takes the lead on this one, which is really nice. It's a departure from our usual. Today's episode was published on Thursday, the 30th of November, 2018. My name's Nathan Wrigley from pictureandword.co.uk, a small web development agency based in the north of England. And if you wouldn't mind going to the WP Builds website, there are several buttons along the top. One of them is the subscribe button, which takes you to wpbuilds.com/subscribe. And if you do click on that button, you can join us on the usual channels. We've got a very growingly popular Facebook group. There's about 1,700 members in there, and it's really, really good fun and thriving, and I would encourage you to join us there. That seems to be the way that most people want to interact with us. But also, we have got things like, we'll alert you on Messenger if that's something that you use a lot. So there's a Messenger link. We post all of this stuff onto YouTube, so if that's your preferred channel, and so on and so forth. So if you go to wpbuilds.com/subscribe, you can find all of the ways that you can stay in touch. We have sent out a few extra emails because of Black Friday, but generally speaking, we don't do too much of that stuff at all. The other thing I'd like to mention is if you go to wpbuilds.com/advertise, then you can alert me as to the fact that you would like to advertise on the podcast. We've got banner ads and audio inserts as well, so you can go and check out what that all means. And finally, /deals, if you want to avail yourself of cash off some notable WordPress plugins. If you go to /deals, you can get money off loads of WordPress products, so go and check that out and see if you can save yourself a little bit of cash. My feeling is that most of us have spent all of our cash this time around because of Black Friday. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by GoDaddy. This episode of WP Builds is sponsored by GoDaddy Pro. Do you build websites for clients? If you do, you should check out GoDaddy Pro. Sign up for free and get tools to manage all your WordPress sites and clients from one central dashboard. Learn more at godaddy.com/pro. And the Page Builder Framework. The Page Builder Framework is an easy-to-customize, mobile responsive and lightning-fast theme for your WordPress website. It works with Beaver Builder, Elementor, Divi and Breezy. Go to wp-pagebuilderframework.com today. We thank all of our sponsors for their support of the WP Builds podcast. Okay, today we're going to be talking about UX. It's not something I know an awful lot about, and I did actually learn an awful lot from Paul Lacey during this episode. It's all about the user journey, the flow, the funnels, how to interact with your client, how to get a project ready so that your client is ready and is able to understand what it is that you've built for them and how their customers are going to be getting through the website. And it's really interesting, really, really different chat. So fascinating, largely because David and I take a back seat. So go check it out. I appreciate you joining us once again on WP Builds.
Today's discussion, we're calling now UX, what on earth is it? Well, in fact, we had a different discussion in mind, but Paul's been telling us about the UX process that his partner at DickieBirds Studios go through. So Paul, really, I'm going to hand it over to you to just explain and how we might make use of what he does.
Yeah, that's cool. The thing just to note, I suppose, is that with DickieBirds, we've got two clear sides to the business, and that's as a result of me and Peter having slightly different backgrounds. And so we do the WordPress and web design stuff, which is my core background as such. But Peter's background over the last couple of years has been very much in user experience, UX, and user interface, not necessarily for websites. And so in the kind of time where we weren't a partnership for a while, we ended up going off and creating our own processes as such. And since we've come back and we reformed DickieBirds at the end of last year, I've been learning a ton of stuff from him, which he finds super amusing when I talk about, my process and stuff like that. But it comes down to, in a way, that some people are web designers or web developers or run, freelance web producers and stuff like that, web builders like us, or small agencies and that kind of thing. And we probably do some UX within what we actually do, but we kind of adapt things that we know, and a lot of the UX that we've learned is just by trial and error. Whereas Peter, for instance, his main thing that he does all day is UX. And that can mean, that, for instance, on the contract that we're doing for a big client at the moment for UX, he has to go to their office 3 or 4 days a week to do that, to work with the rest of the UX team there. And he's doing, even though he's a fantastic designer, he's not doing any user interface work. He's not doing any design work at all. It's not his job. He's purely on UX. So he's not creating any graphics at all. It's all diagrams and text and talking and stuff like that, which is the kind of pure UX. Whereas, we as web designers are probably mashing up UX a little bit with in user interface and our kind of solution providing. Mm-hmm. In a way, you've got 3 major stages. If you were going down the kind of the UX, UI, and solution, which is those 3: UX, user experience, user interface, and solution. And we obviously do the solution, as web designers. And then it's how much UI and UX do we put in there. Does that make sense?
Yep. So far, so good.
Yep. So we could. One of the things I've learned from Peter is some of the stages and what they're called, and the order that they go in. So I guess I could kind of start with some of those. So and kind of talk about how some of us do it, or some of us probably don't do some of these stages. And the first stage, I'm going to say there's 6 stages of UX, and people will debate that. Some people will say there's 10, some will say that 8 or 2 or whatever. But Peter's kind of process is those 6 stages, and that starts with gathering information. Stage 1 is gathering information. So that can be, for instance, interviews with the client. What WP Elevation do it, for instance, they call that go wide, go deep, which they've talked about in some of their webinars and everything. And the idea is to try and discover through this process of conversing with all the stakeholders the actual problem that you're trying to solve, the truth, the problem, whatever it might be. That's the key thing, so that from the first moment what is the problem that we're trying to solve. I imagine that's something, I do that in our web design process, and I imagine that's something you guys do as well, to some extent to another. So you gather information. I mean, how do you guys tend to go about gathering the information as such that gives you the idea of what the problem is that the customer's facing?
I go to their office with a big bucket and say, put it all in there. No,
yep.
I don't.
Get it off your chest.
Yeah, God, stick it in the bucket. There it is. Yeah. No, it's for me. It's all about personal communication. I'm in the lucky position, or not, I suppose, depending on how you look at it, that most of my clients are based in the region in which I live. So I go to their office and I can just ask the question, what problem are you trying to solve with it? And as you say, this sort of go wide, go deep technique. Why do you need a new website? Okay. And of all the 10 things that you just told me, which one is the most important? And then why? Why is that the most important? And keep going, drilling down until you find out what it is that they really, really need, whether they're, they need more revenue created so that they can afford this wing that they're trying to have built on the side, or perhaps they're just trying to sell more of this widget that they've just had redesigned, or whatever. That's my process, and I scribble all that down and then go back to the office, distill it all, write to them saying, okay, this is what I think you're trying to solve. Is that right? and do you want me to do it for you? That's what I do.
Yep.
And
David, do you do much about that?
Yeah, but mostly this is a kind of fail for me because, again, they just want a website in most of even the higher paid clients just want a website, and that's about as much as I get. Or they want a new website because the old one looks old or is outdated because it's not mobile responsive. So it's very hard getting names. Occasionally I do, but I'll only get about one out of them that might be, they want to have more traffic. They want to get more leads.
I tend to send them the series of... I tend to send a bunch of those questions to them in advance so that they can have a think about it before we show up. And I make the point that I'm going to be there for like 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it is. So it's a bit of a waste of time if they're trying to make it up as we go along, because they won't really have achieved anything. So I will try as best as possible to ensure that not only the right people are in the room, but also that they've had a think about this. And usually I'll anecdotally get something on the phone or an email which says, yes, we are prepared for this meeting, we're ready to do it.
I think that's a really nice way of doing it, actually. That's giving some importance to those questions that you've asked, and a kind of time limit on them. So,
well, yeah, I mean, countless times I've been to offices and that conversation has been very muddled, and you just simply don't get anywhere because they didn't know they needed to answer those questions. So flip that process. Just make sure that they know that it's important. They've at least thought about it. Often they haven't really thought a lot about it, but at least they've got something to say. And they know why they need a new website. And as David said, often the case will just be, well, our old one is out of date. But then that's fine. That's the discussion. Okay, if that's the major thing, we'll talk about making it look modern, and let's have a look at a bunch of modern websites. But usually there's more of a business case with the people I deal with. There's more of we're trying to sell more of this, or we've moved offices and so we need a bit of a refresh, or we've got this, new product, or we've got a new director who wants to sell the company in 2 years' time, and so blah blah blah. Yeah.
And that changes everything. If you find out a situation like that, you can say, oh, okay, so in fact the thing we're trying to do here is, the problem to solve is to make the company look attractive from the online perspective.
To
an investor or a buyer.
Or just to, obviously, if they've got this one product which they're launching, to put that front and center, and the design is built around that particular feature. It's impossible to say what the answer is to that because each one is entirely different. But I would say well over 50% of my clients don't answer that question very thoughtfully. They just say, we need a new website, and that conversation then tends to revolve around eking it out of them. And then the other 50%, they've thought about it a lot, and we get a lot further on, and ultimately you get a better website, and you build a better relationship, and you work out that they're probably a client that you want to work with because they've got people who take it seriously, and so on.
Well, Paul, something I just realized, in some ways I give people multiple choice with those kind of questions, why they want this website, because I give them some examples of why they might want to and whether these are relevant. So do you think that happens as well with this gathering info?
I think the gathering info stage is a series of conversations which are different depending on who you're talking to. The most important thing is that you are aware of all the different potential stakeholders and you get to that final problem. You've got you say you don't do it, but you've got a actual paid discovery phase, and a lot of web designers don't do that. And, the pressure from the client is that they don't want to pay for that kind of thing. But you've got to, and I guess not all your clients pay for that discovery phase, but what kind of stuff do you cover in there? You must be finding more information about them.
Yeah, well, as yet, there's only one person who's actually paid for it officially as I put it up on the site. And largely they are looking for sort of technical solutions because they know what they want to do, but there's different ways of doing it. So, in fact, it's not the usual discovery. So I'm yet to find out. But the idea is that I'll be asking the right kind of questions, to kind of find out exactly what's. Most of the time, I'm giving them an idea how difficult it is online to convert people and explaining to them how they might make their website more conversion friendly in that process. So I guess I'm providing information more than I'm discovering, in all honesty.
Yeah, it's creating a conversation though, but that does lead on to stage 2. as Peter's law states, which is the
Peter's law, I like it.
which is creating the personas, creating the user personas. So
can I just point out at this point, I am hopeless at this particular bit. Not only hopeless, I'm kind of almost reluctant to do it. I find this part of the process really difficult to get into and enjoy and even bother with. So sorry, with that caveat, carry on.
But the thing is, I know that you do that. And you just don't realize that, you probably just don't like the phrase user personas.
Yeah.
Whereas I know that, you will talk to your clients in that 45 minutes or that 1 hour meeting.
Yeah.
And you will be talking about who the audience is coming to the website, and you will be bringing that into the conversation without you actually realizing that you're doing that.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit kind of reserved when it comes to all these little phrases and little labels that we've got for all of these clever things. For me, my process is an evolutionary one. I've built it up on the whole autonomously by just mucking everything up. And arriving at the conclusion, there's got to be a better way of doing this, and then going off online and finding it. But I don't have all the technical jargon, and so it makes me feel ill at ease when people talk about it, because that imposter syndrome thing. Somebody mentions a user journey or a customer avatar, and I'm like, I don't really know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, and all they are phrases, but a avatar and a user persona is just a type of person that visits your website or uses your web application or your app.
See, I'm happy with that. I can cope with that, right? You
exactly,
may carry on, yeah.
That's exactly what it is, and you'll have those conversations. But the useful thing about just having a good understanding of these different stages that have been tried and tested on huge blue chip companies where millions of dollars are at stake if they don't get it right, and that's why we can learn from it, is that if you took yourself back to the first day you started doing web design, and then you did your first meeting with a client in the year and it was the year 2018 with all the expectations that clients have got these days versus what people had before, you would have a stressful meeting where you were just kind of winging it and making stuff up and probably just nodding that every time, no, what would you like to have on the website and this, that, and the other, and just nodding and saying, I'll do that. Yep, I'll do that. Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can, because you've learned over time to, have these specific questions and get to the bottom of what the problem is, that probably encompasses situations that they have, especially if it's an e-commerce website, they'll probably have a better idea of who their customer should be, and as a result you can identify those different people. So if you had an e-commerce website for some kind of beauty products or something, then one user persona might be someone who wants to buy a gift voucher, another user persona might be someone who's buying a bunch of stuff for themselves, another one might be someone who's coming to try and find a partner to work with, to do wholesale with, and then you can go deeper and say, okay, someone who's trying to buy a gift, you're going to have people who completely know how to do this because they always buy gifts online for people. That's how they do all their gift shopping. Versus somebody who has got to buy a gift for someone for the first time because this gift is only available on this website, yet this person who's trying to buy a secret gift for this person doesn't really know how to use websites very well, so they're going to struggle with it. So that's a kind of going a little bit deeper into the next phase as such, which is the user journeys. So we're doing this stuff. We're breezing over some of it, I think, as web designers who are under pressure to deliver a website by this time, and a client that potentially doesn't want to engage in that conversation as well. Because in the same way you don't want to talk about user personas, that's going to go over the heads of some people as well, because clients mostly look at other websites and they see the final solution, and they see the graphics and stuff like that, and they see the text, and they look at these amazing websites that they love that you say, oh, that one cost 20 grand. And the reason that one cost 20 grand is because the designer probably did a really good process with it, and as a result the website came out much better than the copycat website that you then find that has tried to copy what they did without the process. Search. So that's all that user personas are. It's just who are the people that need to go on your website and do stuff.
Yeah, I like exactly like you say. I don't give them all those labels. What I don't really often tend to do is kind of break them out into individual things, like you've just said. This person wants to buy this thing, and this person wants to just search for something entirely different. I don't tend to break them out into 2 or 3 or 4 things. For me, it's usually just 1 or 2. What kind of things are you hoping for? And I wouldn't frame it as in that way. For me, it's what I would use the word people and ask. What when people come to your website, what are you hoping that they'll do as part of the discovery? But not kind of inventing a bunch of users. What kind of things are you hoping that this person will do and that this person will do? And I don't think about demographics all that much. I have asked those questions quite a lot. What's the age demographic of your users? And generally speaking, I've mostly given up asking those kind of questions because the answer is, well, we don't know. Which makes it difficult. Then you sort of feel, oh, okay, I don't know where to go with that now.
Well, I'll give you a reason why you might want to think about changing the process just ever so slightly. And that is because when you are asking your clients about, who are the people that are going to go on the website and stuff, you've already got experience of thinking about this every week with a different client, perhaps, and asking that question. But your client is probably either a business owner or a marketing person or something like that, and they're not used to doing that. So the whole point of what some people do with, user personas is they give them a name and they give them a backstory, which sounds like really kind of faffy and ridiculous. And, are we paying for this? What are we paying for here? Are we paying for you to come up with a name?
Can't get my hands on it.
Ridiculous.
I can't see it.
Yeah. But all you're actually doing is making it easier for the client to imagine who their user really is. So it's not something that's beneficial to you. It's giving the client an easier way to answer the question about who their users are. So give it a name. What's their backstory? And then it's almost like an actor getting into role. So it's beneficial to the client to talk about it in that way, as such. And it's like I say, it's not something I always do. It's just something that in an ideal world we would at least take into consideration all the time. So that's all personas really is. And the next, there's 2 stages after this which are kind of interesting because I personally mash them up. My process is to kind of do them both at the same time. Peter was berating me for this yesterday when we were drawing some diagrams. We were drawing some diagrams, and I said, let's do a user journey. And he just started smirking because I picked up a pen and I was drawing a diagram on the board. And because he's like that, he loves it when I've got something wrong. And and so I drew this amazing diagram. In my mind, it was brilliant. He said, so you don't know what a user journey is, do you, Paul? I was like, I was trying to think of what the right response was to this.
No, it's probably the right response.
Yeah, the right response that I had to admit was, no, can you tell me where have I gone wrong here? And he said, you're mixing up flows and user journeys, which is okay because you are thinking about the user journey, but you've created those personas, so you may as well create a user journey for them. And the user journey is usually doesn't have any diagrams at all. It's just words. It's just, for instance, the person arrives on the website, they haven't got a high technical ability, so they see a button that says something like, they see something that helps them to know where they are. They go down this route and they get educated briefly or onboarded onto the website first, and then they find their product and then they buy something. Or another user journey might be somebody comes to the website, they know exactly what to do, they look for the section called this in the navigation, they navigate to it, they try and find a voucher coupon online, they might do that, and then they go back to the checkout and then they buy their thing at discount, something like that.
Yeah.
And then other user journeys take the person off the website, whereby they come onto the website, they find it interesting, and they decide to somehow stay connected to the website as such, which might be signing up to a newsletter or joining social or messenger chat or something like that. But their user journey might happen over the period of half a year until they until that person was naturally ever going to come back to the website and do the thing that we wanted them to do. So I know we mentioned, WP Elevation. They just released a video on YouTube. It was amazing, and it was basically their flow of how they did their their webinars and stuff like that. It's only a 5-minute video, but it's Troy Dean with pictures all over the walls in their office and diagrams and pieces of paper stuck on the wall, and you can see an amazing flow on there, and you can see that some of the users in there are people who they've been warming up for years, like me, so, who finally went and signed up after years of being in their kind of user journey and finally ending up in the checkout. So user journeys are a description. Usually they're a description of the person going through. We don't always do that, and that makes some of our stages for every step that we skip, even if it's just on a subconscious level, makes the things further down the line more of a difficult, stressful thing for us as people trying to create the solution. Because at the beginning you've got what is the problem, and then our job as web designers is usually to create the solution at the end. But if we're missing out information in between, then something I said earlier in our preamble was, you could basically rephrase what UX is as being something called removing the guesswork out of creating solutions for users. Removing the guesswork, that's the big one. And then as a result of that, you can look at your own processes and think, how much guesswork is in what I'm doing? How much is proven experience, which is better than guesswork, versus pure guesswork, versus metric data that I can actually prove that this is the reason that I've done it for. So the one thing we probably all, or a lot of us probably do, is what I did on the board yesterday with Peter, which is flow diagrams.
Yes, I've used those to well, I don't know, sometimes effectively, other times utterly ineffectively. Yep.
Well, sometimes they're rephrased. I mean, a similar thing to a flow is a funnel. So that's like a word that a lot of us are hearing probably quite a lot. You've got Mike Killen teaching people about funnels and web funnels and sales funnels and stuff like that, and then you've got kind of software popping up for creating funnel diagrams and stuff like that, and you've got a webinar funnel, which is you get people to sign up on a landing page. And so a funnel is actually a kind of diagram, usually of a particular user journey. It's that kind of fleshed out with more detail. So whereas in a user journey you don't really have the icons representing a web page or anything like that, you've just got text. It's where you then kind of create that flow whereby you can draw, here is a user, it's this user, they're arriving on the website from search engine. So they come into this way. What do we want them to do? And then you can design the flow. And if you do a really good flow, you will, what my flows often look like are the perfect flow.
The one that nobody will ever do, but here it is anyway.
Yeah. The user arrives on the website and they do exactly what I want them to do. And I show that to the client, and the client is like, that's amazing. The client, so the user's going to arrive on the website, they're going to click this, do that, and then that. And yep. Looks like that's what they're going to do. We've figured it out.
So it's quite an effective tool for pitching to clients. This part, presumably, you're well in the process by now of having them as a client. You're not trying to woo them to use your services. They've already signed on the dotted line, and this is just part of the service that you offer.
Exactly, because I think you can probably show someone. I think you would struggle to impress a client by trying to guess their user personas and their user journeys. But if you were doing a pitch to someone or a proposal, there would not be any harm in showing them and maybe talking through on the proposal via a video or some audio, or talking through an example flow that might be something that might be good for their website. Because usually you can see, what if you look at a client and what their website is, and if you're redeveloping it, you can probably see what the perfect flow would be for their users. So you could propose, here we have your problem, and that you've mentioned in your brief. Here's just one example of the perfect flow, because their website currently is probably not even doing the perfect flow. But in a perfect world, you will do the imperfect flows as well. And so in a perfect world, you would create all the user journeys. You'd create a number of different flows for all those different things, and then you would try to merge those all together in one gigantic diagram, which is probably way too much for our typical website projects. But from that, you can literally throw scenarios at the flow and say, okay, user does this, they're not very good at this, and they actually don't like your brand. But you're the only place we can buy it from. And then you can test that there.
And is the idea with this then that you try to create a situation where every single possible scenario is catered for, or are you, in other words, there's a unique flow for this type of person and a unique flow for this type of person and another one for this, or are you trying to maximize the one flow so that everybody in some way can interact with this one flow that we've got? Because I'm thinking, like a shopping cart, there's not like 15 different ways that you can put things in the cart. There's just one way. You get to that page and you put it in the cart, and then you go to the checkout, or you don't, and so on, or it sits in the cart and so on. There's not like a million ways of putting things in the cart. So did that question even come off? Did I explain that very well?
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. I mean, if you take your website, for instance, you've got an inquiry form, and on your inquiry form, you've got a kind of minimum budget situation going on there. But you know that you will have people going to your form that don't have that budget, and as a result, they just bounce off. You don't want them to be your customer anyway. You're not too interested in them. But you could potentially say that, okay, they're not the customer I want, but I could add in a scenario in my website where they are able to choose a lower budget. And when they do that, you give them some automated friendly advice to say, if this is your budget and this is what you're trying to achieve, then you might be better to DIY something on Squarespace and controversial, but invest the rest of your budget in either learning some marketing skills or hiring somebody to help you create a web strategy that goes along with your Squarespace thing. So instead of hiring a web designer, get the strategy bit done first, and then you can, as a result, on your page still be a helpful person that may still get referrals from someone who said, oh, I went to this guy's website, I couldn't afford him, but your company sounds like you need a much higher value website, so you should go to Picture and Word and fill in their form, and your budget's right up their street. And you were still helpful to that person rather than just, you didn't give them an option.
Yeah, it's
Plus
interesting.
You could take an affiliate fee to Squarespace or something, or some other solution that you proposed.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It was a nice example, actually. So it doesn't always have to be on-site stuff. It doesn't have to be additional pages on your own website. It could be, like you say, some sort of email marketing automation or just different fields on a form that pop up when conditional logic is met and so on. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, sorry.
No, there was a question because what people won't know is that the original question that we were going to tackle was, where should UX come into the system? And I just thought, actually, this is a key thing. I think when you were starting off with the personas, I just wonder whether you would always want to really, if you like, ask about all of the different types of people that your site could possibly have or application could have, or whether you would deal with the primary customer first, go through this process, get the flow right, and perhaps later do the similar process to add in new personas to keep it simple in the first place. I can just imagine a situation where once you've done a really good job on all the different types of people that might come to your homepage, say, as a persona, the rest of it gets even more tricky, doesn't it, to accommodate? And then you've got compromises.
I think I 100% agree with that, especially on website projects. In the kind of stuff Peter's doing with some, blue chip clients, whereby there's there's teams of people representing different aspects of different kind of user personas within an actual company, whether or not they call them that. With us with websites, I'm very much our own process recently is kind of reflective of what you said, in that we try to do a discovery phase, and then we create. We're not calling it minimal viable product because we don't want it to sound minimal, but we're calling it the very viable product, the VVP. I don't know if that's a real phrase, but I've made it up anyway. So, and as a result of that, we have another stage in our current process called growth to goals. So for me, it would be, in a website situation, about targeting those primary people first, because that's what everyone can bear thinking about who's on the project, that core need. And the last thing you want from any web design project is your client to get mentally exhausted from the process. So if you focused on that one type of persona, which might be the primary type of customer, you could get that sorted, and then you could once the website is live, you could, in an ideal world, say, remember we talked about that there's other users that come to the website. We've solved the main problem now to a certain extent. Shall we look a little bit wider now? And then the client hasn't got the pressure of also trying to create the entire website project and all the content and have the pressure from their bosses. They've done that thing. They've, had the picture in the paper, opened the bottle of champagne and everything. The website is live, and the pressure's off to then kind of, maybe do some A/B split testing if that was feasible, or just to go back and, theorize, things again and say, oh, there's some other type of customers we're missing out on, the kind of thing like people dropping out of the checkout. They're just about to buy. So you might not do that in the very viable product, but then you'd be kind of like, we've checked the website, and you've got a lot of people dropping out of at the point of where they're about to buy something. So should we address that now? And if you've got some ongoing deal with that client because you've built that into your proposal, even if it's just a few hours a month or something, at least you can have those conversations, which then might allow them to see more value in the idea of that and invest some more money to a mutual benefit, that you get more money and the client gets a further optimized website or product as such.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was thinking. If you can concentrate on one, then you've got live data to be able to go through the whole process again, and to bring in other personas, and to see whether, by trying to accommodate some other personas, whether you damage what you were doing to the original primary persona.
Yeah, or it just gets muddy, it just gets confusing, because you might have completely contrary personas, who kind of damage each other, if you know what I mean. This one wants to do this and this one wants to do that. Oh, they're at complete odds with each other. A lot of this stuff, I don't know how this is going to sound, but a lot of this stuff is too much for my cottage industry one-man band website building service, if you know what I mean. I think you need teams and agent, like a big proper agency and all of that to carry a lot of this stuff off. So, but I like the idea of just doing one, your primary one, because I can cope with that, and that's something that I can see myself doing. Whereas if it was 3 or 4, all of a sudden the tentacles, there's too many arms to this, and there's just too much going on for me and my little mind to cope with and to feed back and really truly understand.
Exactly. That's why in the larger UX projects with the blue chip clients, they are employing someone like Peter hiring from us purely to do the UX, and he's working with a number of different stakeholders who are worrying about their specific person, and then someone else is thinking about someone else. So he's having individual conversations, and he's part of a UX team that is put together. There's multiple people, because there's, in this particular job that we're doing at the moment, there is it's an international project. There's like 42 different countries, and there's different cultures to think about. There's different. It's ridiculous. It's a huge responsibility as such. But at our level, we focus on probably the primary goal, and then just keep energies high for us and the client on that, and then ideally we can then keep adding value by coming up with different scenarios later on. So I think that was flows, wasn't it? That was so there was something I was going to say, and that was a question to David, I think, but I've forgotten. So sorry about that. Never mind. You might come back to me. In the world of UX, you would then have a stage which UX people might call low fidelity prototypes, but we typically call it wireframes. So, we know that wireframes are useful to do. We don't always do them now because we can almost prototype a website in something like Beaver Builder or Breezy or Elementor, so we can, just create a kind of rough version of it, as long as our client fully understands that this isn't the design solution.
I've had that so many times.
Yeah.
But it's so bland. Yes, it's supposed to be bland.
Yes, it's supposed to have grey boxes. So yeah, exactly. So the main difference between, say, a wireframe and a low fidelity prototype, the low fidelity bit just means there's no graphics, there's no design. That's all that means. And then the prototype means that you can interact with it to some extent. So, for instance, you might create, again, WP Elevation, on a webinar I saw this, they typically would create a prototype. And it means that, you just install WordPress, install the plugins that you think you might need, not do any design at all, not put any real content in. You might put a couple of lines in here and there as guidance. But if the client said we need a shop, you would install WooCommerce and you would get the shop working. And then you would make sure that, at the absolute basic, you could visit this homepage and find your way to the shop based on the flow. So it's kind of like combining the flow with, it's skipping wireframes and doing wireframes as an actual interactive thing.
I'm totally up for that. I really like that process. I think that's really good because basically, without the client sort of realizing it, you've made a start on the website, the actual website.
Yeah.
You've done a lot. You've got a few of the plugins in there. You've got some of the menu items sorted, and they're able to actually see what's going to happen. But there's no design, no attention whatsoever given to the way it looks. It's basically black on white with a bit of grey. I like that.
Exactly.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people probably do that or do wireframes to some extent. I mean, some of our projects, I just go straight into the design because, like David said earlier, the situation is really, really clear what they want. It's just a upgrade of their existing design. So I don't need to do certain things as valuable as it might be anyway. But you take that then and you move on to user testing next, which is the...
Can I just point out, going back to the live wireframe, what did you call it again? The
low fidelity.
The low fidelity. I think that's really an important step because you will very quickly, they'll come back to you straight away with, but I don't like the menu there, and I don't like the fact that it says home. I just want home where the logo is. That's what everybody does now. They just click the logo. They don't need it, and it just you get so many of those problems out in the air so quickly without it being, you've suddenly got a bunch of CSS classes and things that you've then got to rewrite because you've got to move this to there. You can get all of that, the structure of it, when it's completely irrelevant what it looks like, and that can save quite a bit of time.
Exactly. You can imagine, especially before we had page builders and lots of plugins to help us, how many of us got to that situation where we said to the client, well, we've built it now and we've done all the code, so we needed to know about that thing you just told us about earlier. So in theory, if you do good UX and you do the personas and the user journeys and the flows and the low fidelity prototype, that conversation chance of happening is vastly reduced, which means happier client and less stress. So, while we can't all afford to do it exactly to how the UX books and manuals teach us, if we've at least got these concerns on our mind that, might someone pop up when I've done the website. I think you said something earlier in our preamble that you sometimes will get an email from someone that Bob from who you've never heard of has told your contact that this needs to be done on the website.
Yeah.
And you think, and apparently Bob is a very important person, so you've just got to do it.
Yeah. Even though Bob hasn't written down in any way clearly, because he was writing to his friend at the company and they know each other and they've got all the vernacular of the company and blah, blah, blah. Right. Anyway, rant over.
Yeah. So if you've with the kind of different processes, you would probably, Bob might have come into it at a certain point, although you can't always account for that because, this mythical Bob might be just someone who absolutely doesn't care about seeing anything until that person can see something, and that's when they decide to engage, which isn't your fault, it isn't your problem, it's just an external factor, and then you just try and do your best with that scenario, really. But yeah, so low fidelity prototype, the reason it's called low fidelity prototype is because in the kind of world of UX and UI outside of websites, you also have something called the high fidelity prototype. So that doesn't apply to us so much. That's actually the final. That's the final solution usually of a person who does pure UI. Because when you get to the UI stage, there is then, after you've completed what you call a high fidelity prototype, which is basically a realistic prototype. It looks like a web app. It looks like a mobile app. You can press buttons, things happen. I'm pressing my hand with my finger at the moment. Things happen, and then that is a major part of the brief that then goes on to the developer who might be developing that app, which is, so in the high profile stuff, there'll be a UX person or team, there'll be a UI team or person, and there will be a person or a team that creates the actual developed solution. And the way you can know that that person has done the solution correctly is because it works exactly as the high fidelity prototype, except there's real data in there, and it's saving stuff to databases and whatnot. So that's why you've got low fidelity prototype and high fidelity prototype. And that's why we as web designers don't really talk about a low fidelity prototype, because we move straight onto the solution normally after that. But in an ideal world, you would take that low fidelity prototype and do user testing. Because it's interactive, you can then get some different personas and get them to test it. I think that's something we probably as web designers do a lot more user testing once the website is live, and then we take feedback and ideally then split test if we've got the budget for that, and
or we don't do much of it at all.
Exactly, that is the other one. Yeah. So obviously at DickieBirds Studio we do lots. No. No. So yeah, it's a very difficult thing to get the client to buy into.
Oh, impossible! Like that's never going to happen on a paid basis for the clients that I'm dealing with. They just want to know. It's just not. I have really almost zero experience. Although David has, he was telling us about the time when he did it, and tell us about that, David.
Well, I think we should have a discussion on this one alone. But I just took from Steve Krug, who did, I think many people will know his book, Don't Make Me Think. He did a follow-up book called Rocket Surgery Made Easy. And there's actually a YouTube video that is definitely worth checking out, where it's about 10 minutes. And it shows you how to just take 3 people and take them through user testing. So I did this with about 8 people on one site, only one site ever, but so revealing it was. I mean, these people found, it was an e-commerce shop. They found pages I didn't know existed.
So it was valuable. You actually got.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was such a, it's such a low expense to learn so much about what can go wrong.
Yeah, that's. I just wish I had the setup to do that and the wherewithal to get the clients to do it, but we never do that. Right, sorry, Paul. We're gonna have to wrap it up soonish, I think. But tell us about the other phases or.
Well, that is the user testing is actually the final stage of user experience or UX design, because with pure UX you don't actually do the user interface nor the solution. Obviously, us as web designers we do, but what happens in pure UX is that at the user testing stage, people are testing the low fidelity prototype, and they will discover problems with that. Then those problems will be documented. And then you go back to the beginning. You might need to have another interview with the client and talk about those problems, adjust the personas or add in new personas, adjust the user journeys, adjust the flows. So it's these kind of iterative small tweaks that you're making to just keep cleaning the proposed solution to the problem. And then you get to the point where you've done the new version of the low fidelity prototype, which might have just took a few hours to do that entire tweaking process. But then you go back to the user testing, which you can imagine in our web design world is just not going to happen. We're just not going to, in most cases, get clients who understand that, you might have actually got it wrong, and aren't you supposed to be the expert, the web designer and stuff? And, you've apparently not accounted for these things, so I want the money back. So So that is actually the end of the UX phase. But us as web designers, we tend to then do what a UI and a developer might also do. The two phases for UI people tends to be creating a design system, which is basically a library of user interface bits and bobs, a library of modules as such. And then they will typically create a high fidelity prototype, which I mentioned earlier, which is basically the low fidelity prototype, all colored in and looking beautiful. You will typically do user testing again then when in the larger situations, because you might find that the UI has introduced problems to the flow as a result of colors or something like that, or distracting aspects of the user interface. So you'll then go around again until you've eventually got the user testing to the point where the high fidelity prototype is working perfectly for all the users that you're testing it with. Then you hand that over to a developer who might develop the web app or a mobile app or whatever, or an e-commerce system or whatever it might be. But I think as web designers, we tend to, we go from probably low fidelity prototype or wireframes, if we do that, to creating the actual website. And I think what's kind of nice about the web design process is that if we can get like an ongoing financial arrangement with with our clients, we can say, okay, let's put this out there, let's see the stats, let's check what people are doing on the website, let's see how many people are quitting the checkout, and then let's adjust it. Let's try some A/B split testing. So, but with the bigger systems, you tend to try and do remove as much of the guesswork as possible. But I think it's totally fine that web designers, people like us, like to put the proposed solution out there and then see how it goes and then iterate it from there. I think that's a more realistic way for us to handle UX. So the main point of everything here is that if you know those different stages and you can be aware of them, then they come into your thinking and they come into your conversations. You don't have to do a full UX process on every single project. It's just nice to know those things because it's reassuring. If you're having the right conversations, you're almost able to reassure yourself that you've had the right conversations with the client. As you go along.
I would say that in my case, there's 100% chance that I won't implement all of those things, but exactly right what you just said. Some of those things are just good to know. It's nice to know that those things exist, and potentially in my case to actually give them a name and understand a little bit more about what their purpose is and where they fit in. I didn't, for example, realise there was a sort of more preferred way to do them in an exact order and so on. That was really, really interesting. Thank you. That was really cool. So more of an interview than it was a discussion, but very valuable nonetheless. Have you got anything to add to that, David?
Yeah, I got a lot from that actually, because I just thought I could, all the stages, so gather information was just what do you want and what do you want this to do. Personas, easy. Tell us about the people who come to your site and who else. User journeys, where do you want them to go? What they're going to need to do. You can have all this conversation really easy, can't you? And
yes.
Yeah.
Here's my basic website, and then we'll fill it in with all the colors that you like and the style. I think we all do this actually in some form or another.
We just don't name it. That's
exactly.
the bit I hadn't named it. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Okay, I think we'll knock it on the head there. And I will say, knock it on the head. I'll say thank you to Paul Lacey and obviously David as normal. Well, I hope you found that interesting. I certainly did. Thanks for paying attention once more. Really appreciate it. Just one quick word from our sponsor, which is GoDaddy this week. Thanks to GoDaddy Pro for sponsoring this episode of WP Builds. Here's what you get with GoDaddy Pro. Pro sites to monitor and manage all your WordPress installations, no matter where they're hosted. Pro clients to manage your clients' GoDaddy products on their behalf. And Pro rewards for exclusive discounts and special offers. And the best part, you get all of this for free. Learn more and sign up at godaddy.com/pro. And we thank GoDaddy for their continued support of the WP Builds podcast. Right, that's it for this week. I hope you have a lovely week. Join us on Monday at 7 o'clock UK time. I put out a WordPress news item. It's about 10 to 15 minutes long, so hopefully that'll be some use to you. Have a lovely week. Bye-bye.